Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. We always try to tackle some pretty interesting subjects, and today we're looking at something really fascinating.
Yeah, this is, well, it's a book that's been discussed, debated, and analyzed for well over 1,000 years.
Right, we're talking about the Quran.
Exactly. And what's really interesting about this article we're looking at today? It's from the book Divine Blueprint by Paygam Mustafa, who also wrote the Quran Enemy.
Yeah.
And this particular section was written by Dr. Ijaz Rasul, who, he's a well-known speaker and writer on all things Quran.
In this article, it really jumps right into the deep end, doesn't it?
It does,
Yeah.
yeah. The Quran makes this very bold claim that it's of divine origin. It's from God.
And Dr. Rasul lays out some pretty compelling arguments to support that claim.
He does, and one of the first things he brings up is this challenge the Quran presents right from the start. It basically says, okay, if you doubt me, try to produce something like this.
It's like throwing down the gauntlet.
It really is.
Mm.
And it's not just about creating a book with a similar message. It's about the specific language, the intricate structure, the way it lays out a legal framework.
Yeah, it's incredibly detailed.
It is, and that's what makes the challenge so audacious. For over 1,400 years, countless people have tried to meet that challenge, and yet no one has been able to replicate the Quran in the way it demands.
Wow, that's a long time to go unchallenged.
Sure.
I mean, wouldn't some people say that it's just a product of its time?
Yeah.
A reflection of the society and culture it emerged from?
Sure, some people might say that. But this article highlights some really unique features of the Quran that make that explanation really difficult to accept. One of the most intriguing ones is this concept of self-reference.
Self-reference, I'm not sure I follow.
Okay, think of it like a barcode, those black and white lines you see on products. There's a built-in check digit in a barcode that helps verify the information encoded in the barcode itself.
Oh, okay, I get it.
The Quran has something similar. It's filled with internal consistencies that point towards a single overarching design, almost like a fingerprint, proving its authenticity.
Interesting. So what kind of consistencies are we talking about? Can you give me an example?
Absolutely. So, for instance, the article mentions that words like day and night appear an equal number of times throughout the entire Quran.
Whoa, that's pretty amazing.
It is, right? And this kind of meticulous balance extends to other themes and concepts as well, suggesting an incredible level of intentionality that's really hard to brush off as mere coincidence.
That makes sense. Now, I also remember reading in the article about the scientific claims in the Quran that seem to align with modern discoveries.
Oh, yeah, that's another really interesting point.
So is that another example of this internal consistency we're talking about?
It could be seen that way.
Yep.
The article mentions Dr. Maurice Bucaille and his book, The Bible, the Quran, and Science.
Yeah, I've heard of that one.
And in it, he really dives into the surprising congruence between certain Quranic verses and what we've discovered through modern science, particularly in fields like embryology and oceanography.
Okay, but couldn't skeptics just say that those are just lucky guesses or, just general observations that anyone could have made back then?
That's a common counterargument.
Hmm.
However, when you look at the sheer volume and specificity of these scientific references spanning so many different disciplines, it becomes a less convincing explanation. It's not just a few vague statements, it's detailed information that we've only recently come to understand with all our advanced technology and research.
So if it wasn't just a product of its time or, just a bunch of lucky guesses, how does the article explain the Quran's origin?
Well, it goes back to this idea of divine authorship, that the Quran was revealed to the messenger of God over a period of 23 years.
Right.
And it emphasizes that despite this extended time frame, the Quran maintains this incredible consistency in its style, grammar, and core message throughout.
23 years. That's a really long time to maintain that level of consistency, especially when you think about all the different topics covered in the Quran.
Exactly. And this consistency becomes even more fascinating when you start looking at all the different attempts people have made throughout history to try and explain the Quran's origin from a purely human perspective.
Oh, okay. So what are some of those attempts?
Well, some people have suggested that the messenger of God himself was the sole author of the Quran.
Mm.
However, as the article points out, the Quran lacks the personal touches you might expect from a human author. It's very consistent in focusing on conveying a timeless message rather than personal opinions or experiences.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what about the idea that maybe it was a group of people working together, like a collaborative effort?
The group authorship theory, right? That's another one that's been proposed. But, if that were the case, wouldn't we see signs of, multiple writing styles or maybe even some contradictions or revisions along the way?
Yeah, you'd think so, right?
Hi.
I mean, that's how most books are written these days with teams of editors and writers.
Exactly. And yet the Quran has remained remarkably consistent over time. It's almost as if it appeared fully formed right from the start, defying that whole process of, human collaboration and revision that we're used to seeing.
That is pretty strange. Now, I have to admit, the article mentions one more theory that's kind of out there.
Oh, you mean the one about the devil being the author?
Yeah, that one always throws me for a loop. It just seems so counterintuitive.
I know, right? It's a tough one to wrap your head around. I mean, think about it. Why would a malevolent being dedicate an entire book to praising God, encouraging good deeds, and even acknowledging his own defeat? It just doesn't add up.
It really doesn't. So, okay, we've ruled out the messenger of God writing it alone, a group of authors, and even the devil
Yeah.
as possible explanations. So what's the article's take on what makes the Quran so unique and, why it's had such a lasting impact?
Well, it brings us back to this idea of divine authorship, that the Quran is not just a book, but a complete way of life. It calls it deen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it emphasizes that this way of life is built on these permanent values. It's designed to meet our needs both materially and spiritually.
Okay, so how does that make it different from other systems or philosophies that humans have come up with over the centuries?
That's a great question, and it's something the article touches on. You see a lot of human-made systems, they're prone to flaws, right? They're often limited by the biases and limitations of their creators. But the Quran, it presents this consistent, interconnected system of values and principles that have stood the test of time for centuries.
So it's not just about, abstract ideas.
Yeah.
It actually provides practical guidance for everyday life.
Absolutely. It covers everything from personal conduct and family relationships to things like social justice and economic principles.
Wow, so it's really comprehensive.
It is, and it all ties back to this core message of submitting to God's will and living a life of purpose and meaning.
Can you give me a specific example of how that practicality plays out in the Quran?
Sure. Let's take the Quran's perspective on wealth, for instance. It strongly encourages generosity and using your resources to help those in need.
Okay.
The emphasis is on using wealth as a way to uplift society as a whole, not just as something to hoard or use for personal gain.
I see. So it's not about material wealth. It's about using wealth as a tool for positive change.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that true wealth lies in our connection with God and our service to others. It's a perspective that really challenges our often materialistic and individualistic tendencies.
It's a powerful message for sure. Now, going back to what we talked about earlier about the Quran's interconnectedness, it seems like it touches on so many different aspects of life, science, law, ethics, social principles. It's all woven together.
You're absolutely right. And that interconnectedness is one of the things that makes the Quran so fascinating. It's not just a collection of random ideas, it's a holistic system where each part supports and reinforces the others. And that speaks to this idea of divine design, that there's a purpose behind everything.
And that takes us back to the challenge the Quran poses right at the beginning. If this interconnectedness is such a key part of its message, wouldn't that make it even harder to replicate?
Absolutely. It's not just about imitating the language or the style. It's about understanding and recreating this intricate web of ideas and principles that are embedded throughout the entire text.
Earlier, you mentioned the Quran's unique linguistic features. Can you talk a bit more about those?
Oh, sure. The Quran, it's made up of just over 6,000 verses, but it manages to cover an incredible range of topics with this remarkable precision and eloquence. It's been a source of fascination for scholars and linguists for centuries.
It seems almost paradoxical that a text so concise could also be so comprehensive in its scope.
It really is. And that speaks to the power and beauty of the Quran's language. And then there's the structure itself. It's designed in a way that makes it incredibly easy to memorize, even for children.
Wow, I didn't know that.
It's true. And, from a psychological perspective, that's a really effective technique for language learning and retention.
It's almost like it was designed to be easily shared and passed down through generations, preserving its message through both oral and written traditions. And remember, all of this was revealed over a period of 23 years.
That's right, which makes it all the more impressive. To maintain that level of linguistic consistency and stylistic coherence over such a long period without a single error or contradiction, well, it really speaks to the extraordinary nature of the Quran.
So we've covered a lot today: the challenge, the self-validation, the scientific references, the linguistic mastery, the holistic approach to life. It's been a really fascinating discussion.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, why should all of this matter to someone listening in today? What's the key takeaway here?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think what makes the Quran so compelling, regardless of your background or beliefs, is that it encourages us to think critically, to question our assumptions, and to really grapple with these fundamental questions about life, the universe, and our place in it all.
So it's not about blind faith or accepting things at face value.
Not at all. It's about seeking understanding, engaging with the text, and ultimately coming to your own conclusions. It's an invitation to explore the Qur'an's depths, ponder its wisdom, and see if its message resonates with your own experiences and observations. And for those who want to dig even deeper, the article recommends checking out the Quran NME, New Millennium Exposition by the same author, Paygam Mustafa.
It sounds like a great resource for anyone looking to really understand the Qur'an's message and explore its many layers of meaning. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from our conversation today?
I think the most important thing is to approach the Quran with an open mind and a genuine desire to learn. Don't just take other people's word for it. Engage with the text, directly ask questions, and see what insights you uncover for yourself.
It's about embarking on that personal journey of discovery and letting the Qur'an speak to you directly.
Exactly, because I truly believe that no matter your background or beliefs, there's something in the Quran that can resonate with every human being. Its message of hope, compassion, and justice, it transcends time and culture. It offers guidance and inspiration for anyone seeking a more meaningful life. Yeah, it's a journey that's, been going on for centuries and will likely continue for centuries more.
For sure. So as our listeners start or continue their own exploration of the Qur'an, what's the one thing you'd want them to keep in mind?
I think it's important to remember that the Quran, it's not just some ancient text, or just a set of rules. It's a living source of wisdom and guidance that people from all walks of life continue to find meaning in.
It's about connecting with the Qur'an's message on a personal level,
Yeah.
reflecting on its meanings and seeing how its insights can be applied to, our lives and the challenges we face today.
Exactly. It's an ongoing journey of discovery, and I truly believe that the more we engage with the Quran, the more we'll come to appreciate its depth, its beauty, and its relevance to, the human experience.
Well said. Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into the Qur'an today. It's been an incredible journey exploring a book that continues to fascinate and inspire.
It has been a pleasure.
And for those of you who are eager to learn more, I highly recommend checking out the Quran NME, New Millennium Exposition by Paygam Mustafa. This is a fantastic resource for anyone who wants to delve deeper into the Quran's message and, really explore its profound meanings.
It's a journey worth taking, for sure.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the world of knowledge.